I'm Charlotte, and I am welcoming you to Mobile World Congress 2017 and the TV booth at the Dell Technologies Zone. So I'm sitting here today with Paul Parker Johnson, Principal Analyst at ACG Research, and Mehdi from Dell Technologies and the Service Provider Solutions team. They have together created a research, and this study is titled Creating Agility and Efficiency at Scale, the Economic Advantages of Open Architecture in NFV Deployments. So why was this research so important?
Right, understood. This particular study was very important because communication service providers now have a great imperative to become more flexible and agile in how they deliver services. And they have choices available for how they want to achieve that goal. One of the choices they have is to take a pre-bundled solution from a supplier and live with the limits of that solution and how they try to achieve their goals. The other alternative, which this operator chose, was to use the true vision of creating NFV as an open service delivery platform and use it as a platform for open innovation over time. There hasn't been much evidence about comparing the benefits of option A versus option B in the industry so far. This study was focused on gaining that evidence, which is why it's so meaningful for the industry.
So what was the most interesting finding?
Well, in terms of most compelling findings in this study, the two categories are, first, how efficient the platform choice this operator made is. The operating advantages and the capital cost advantages, which we'll get into, were quite compelling. The second big reason is, in fact, how agile and flexible they are in being able to create and deliver new services for their customers. So we'll put some statistics around that a little bit later in the conversation.
Interesting. So could you please elaborate a little bit on the transformation goals and the aspect of the deployment?
Right, yes. In their case, this operator really wanted to transform themselves to become a little bit more like a cloud provider in delivering their services. They want to be more nimble, more agile in how they bring new applications to market. So they had a goal of making a very agile and flexible service delivery platform was their number one goal. The second goal was to do that with the maximum possible efficiency that they could achieve. And those were they had very specific targets to achieve in those areas. Those were the big driving goals for them.
Interesting. So this communication service provider, did they achieve their goals?
Yes, it's very interesting. In many cases when operators have tried to make this kind of transformation, it takes them a lot longer than they think it's going to when they start. In this case, this operator was able to deploy 9 different production sites in less than 1 year's time, which for a national scale service provider is a significant accomplishment. And in terms of being able to accelerate service delivery, they have materially advanced the speed at which they can create new services using this new platform. So yes, they have made great progress.
So it was successful.
Yes.
Awesome. So Mehdi, what is your interpretation, and what do you think these findings mean for Dell Technologies and the industry as a whole?
Sure. So first of all, I want to put the study findings in the context of the NFV evolution and life cycle. We went from a couple of years ago, the early beginnings and POCs and pilots, then we went into pre-production trials, and I think we're entering now the realm of, meaningful production deployments, moving into hyperscale, hyperconnectivity. A couple of very interesting validation points. One on, first of all, the breakthrough economics. I think for the first time, this is one of the first instances where we can really point to specific results of the transformation. There were a lot of assumptions made around the economics of a transformation. I think now we have proof that it is working. The second aspect is really around, I would say, agility, as you rightfully said. I think we have proof now that CSPs can innovate at web speed, right? I think the study went through a lot of detail into the actual service activation, service composition, and so on and so forth, and you So culturally, I would say, and technologically, it is possible, and we can actually quantify the benefits. 3x the speed at 65% of the time is compelling.
Wow.
Right?
Yep.
I think it's a validation of our own vision in terms of Dell-EMC, in terms of open, disaggregated, best-of-breed solutions with access to, I would say, large, curated ecosystems as well, right? And then lastly, it's a validation for us, for Dell-EMC, of our own portfolio. I mean, this is one of the most obviously prestigious deployments for us, and we have met some of the most stringent requirements in terms of resiliency, being production hardened, security, and so on and so forth. So this is a validation for our PowerEdge portfolio, Power Vault, DSS 9000, and also our S-Series open networking portfolio. So it's very meaningful.
So we had a couple of really, really successful and cool, interesting findings in what you just said there. Just to wrap it up, what would you say were the most interesting findings that stood out?
Interesting. Well, Mehdi mentioned the factor of agility that they were able to achieve.
Yeah.
So being able to introduce new services 3 times as fast as with a legacy model is a very significant finding.
Cool.
And also cutting their capital costs in half in doing this class of deployment at national scale is very meaningful for operators of this scale.
Interesting. And Mehdi?
So I would dare to say that the figures around agility are the most compelling to me and to us. So I mentioned technologically and I mentioned culturally. Culturally, I think we have, with this study and this deployment, demonstrated that CSPs can adopt best practices in terms of DevOps, CI/CD. So culturally, that's a departure from the traditional waterfall model for deploying and introducing services. I think the second aspect really around is technological, right? Being able to get into a much more flexible of fail fast, innovate, trial and error model is actually also a departure from the traditional model. So I think those figures on 3x at 65% of the cost are compelling.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, PJ and Mehdi, for coming to the TV studio at Dell Technologies at Mobile World Congress, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.